Welcome to Indiana Sports Beat Radio, presented by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington and Southern Stone Restaurant.
Looks over the middle, second guesses, fires, throws. Does he make the catch in the end zone? Yes! Touchdown! Oladipo to win it.
Another one!
He got
Another one!
Oladipo!
Another one!
Huge hole. He's at the 30. He's going to go. 10, 5, touchdown. Jonathan Taylor.
Worked out by Burke. Bounces into Cody. Puts it up. Scores!
Now, from the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios, here's your host, Jim Coyle.
Welcome into Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Jim Coyle will be here with us here shortly. This is your producer, John Alden, joined alongside Dylan Sinn from the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette. Usually with us on Wednesdays, but today joining us on a Friday. How you doing, Dylan?
I'm good, John. I'm good. Thank you guys for having me on. I'm excited to be back.
Yes, we're excited to have you back as well. Busy week in college football. You had a busy night yourself last night. I saw you were covering some rainy high school soccer, it looked like.
I was. It poured the entire second half. I was able to stay dry in the press box. And of course, you have to go. In high school, you got to go out on the field to go get post-game interviews. So it was an interesting experience doing that, but I had a lot of fun. And Bishop Dwenger soccer, boys soccer, won their regional semifinal. They're in the regional final. They'll play Canterbury, another Fort Wayne team, on Saturday. We got a bunch of teams playing. So I'm actually not going to IU Michigan State. I will be going to boys soccer regionals. Actually, one girls, one boys. I'm all over the place on Saturday.
So I heard you say regionals. So down here in Kentucky, we also call them regionals. But I've also heard it referred to as sectionals in Indiana. What's the difference?
So sectionals are the earlier rounds. So once the teams that win the sectional championship move on to regionals.
Okay.
And then and then after that you move on to semi-state and then state. It's very confusing.
Semi-state. That's an odd term too. We don't have that down here either.
It is, yes. It's very confusing for me personally because when I was a kid, I grew up in Illinois. Illinois goes regionals, you win a regional championship, you move on to the sectional. So it's flipped in Indiana, and then Indiana or in Illinois they call the semi-state, they call it super sectionals. So it's very confusing, but I believe the Indiana one came first, so I think they have some precedent there.
Yeah, down here we have the districts come first, then you go to regionals, and then depending on what sport it is, you have the state tournament. And I know in basketball they call it the Sweet 16. The top 16 teams go to the state tournament.
Yeah,
and it's one big separate event with the top 16 teams. So it's pretty interesting the different ways that high school athletics work in different states. So I thought I'd bring that up as we were getting started, but. You said you won't be at the Indiana-Michigan State game this week. You got to cover a lot of the high school stuff.
I will not. Yeah, I will be at soccer because we have so many teams in. We just needed some people there. So that is the plan this week. I will be following the Hoosiers from afar, obviously, as they try to hand Michigan State its first loss, which should be a lot of fun. It should be a really fun atmosphere in Bloomington.
Got a very difficult matchup for Indiana coming out of the bye week. You got an undefeated 6-0 team with the Spartans. Kenneth Walker III is looking like I don't know if I should say dark horse Heisman candidate. Maybe he's a legitimate Heisman candidate, but man, he is going to be a problem for Indiana if he performs the way that he's been performing so far this year.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about his Heisman chances. First of all, he's leading the country in rushing, and there isn't a slam dunk quarterback prospect. No, it's been a while since a running back did win the Heisman Trophy, but Kenneth Walker III has probably as good a chance as anyone at this point at any position, just because not only does he lead the country in rushing right now, but he's going to have a ton of opportunities down the stretch of the season on national TV. They still have to play Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State, not to mention IU on Saturday. So Michigan State, if they end up going 10-2, 11-1 and making the Big Ten title game, somehow they beat Ohio State, break their grip on the Big Ten. Kenneth Walker III people are going to know his name by the end of the season. And with Alabama losing Bryce Young, I thought was the favorite for a while. I think Walker has as good a chance as anyone right now.
It seems like a lot of the quarterbacks came in overhyped, including Michael Penix. Not that Michael Penix was an overhyped Heisman candidate, But the guys like Sam Howell, Spencer Rattler in particular, I mean, he's already been benched to Oklahoma, excuse me. And Sam Howell in North Carolina haven't lived up to any sort of expectations that they were given coming into the season. So it would make sense for somebody like Kenneth Walker to be able to sneak into that and potentially win it if they end up having a successful rest of the season.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense to me. Yeah, you talked about Rattler. It's very surprising that he hasn't lived up to expectations. Howell, I feel bad for Sam Howell in North Carolina. People just assumed that they were going to keep riding. Their trajectory was going to keep going up, up, up. After they lost 2 NFL running backs and 2 NFL wide receivers, and I didn't see it before the season. I even wrote before the season. I said that basically you're expecting Sam Howell to take this leap into number 1 overall pick territory, and the guy is good. But that's a lot to expect for anyone. Mm-hmm. And people were basing their opinion of North Carolina essentially on him being able to do it by himself without all those weapons. And so even Mac Brown said it this week. He said the people that picked us in the top 10 were obviously wrong. What were they doing? And I was like, I didn't, Mac.
Yeah, that's nuts. But back to this Indiana, Michigan State. Like we said earlier, Indiana coming off of a bye week. Probably one of the most needed bye weeks that Indiana has needed in recent years with the struggles they've had early on this season. It's likely that we're going to see Jack Tuttle come out and be the starter. I don't think that's officially been said unless I missed something, but all signs point to Jack Tuttle. Michael Penix got hurt last week. Even if Michael Penix was healthy, I think it's smart to go with Tuttle right now. You know he's been successful in the games he played in last season. Michael Penix, even when he's been declared healthy, I don't think he's ever going to be back to the 100% that he was last season and before, because once you've gone through so many injuries, you can only recover so much, and your full potential becomes something different than it was previously. So I think it's time to give Jack Tuttle a chance and maybe give this offense a breath of fresh air, because boy, do they need it.
Yeah, I think the bye week did come at a good time. I do expect to see. I don't have any special information on this other than what everyone else has heard, but I do expect that Tuttle will play tomorrow. I wouldn't be surprised to see Donovan McCulley either. We saw him a lot in fall camp. He looked very, very good. Obviously, still a true freshman, but he looked very, very good. And he could be a very good player for Indiana at some point. And so they're probably going to want to keep him around. But I do think for right now, Tuttle is probably going to be the guy. And as Tom Allen has said repeatedly, they trust him. He did lead them to the win over Wisconsin last year, although Wisconsin wasn't good last year. They're not good this year. So how much is that really worth? Although Tuttle has all the tools. He has the trust of the locker room. And I think that's kind of what's important right now. The biggest thing is that with the bye week, if they are going to Tuttle, assuming they are, they had 2 weeks to kind of prepare him and put him in there as a starter, get him starters reps. Although Tom Allen loves to give his backup quarterbacks reps in practice. It's not like Tuttle is coming into this completely unprepared, obviously.
Yeah.
They'll have him ready if he is the guy. I do feel that Penix still has plenty of ability. And I do think he can be a very, very good player. It's just a question of figuring out what ails him this year. And it's going to take some time, I think. So hopefully that's something that can be looked at going forward.
Do you think that if Indiana is able to pull this off, that with the fact that Michigan State is currently undefeated, in my opinion, I don't want to say they're overrated, but they've been helped out a lot by their schedule. I know they beat 24th ranked Miami, but they've not panned out the way that they were supposed to pan out either. De'Aaron King having a lot of similar issues that Michael Penix has had for Miami. But back to what I was saying, if Indiana's able to pull this off, do you think this is enough of a momentum booster of a win going into Ohio State next week to kind of turn their season around and give them enough confidence to maybe help them live up to their potential the rest of the games going forward?
Yeah, I think from what we've heard, I don't think that there's a lack of confidence in their locker room right now. I do think that despite the fact they started 2-3, despite the fact they lost big to Penn State and Iowa, I do think that they're from everything we've heard, there's still a good deal of belief in that locker room that they're going to get some big wins this season. I do think that Michigan State, although their schedule has not been particularly great, they have done what good teams generally do against bad teams, which is win pretty handily. They did do a very good job against Rutgers last week, despite Rutgers basically running some things that you wouldn't have expected, and Michigan State was able to handle all that. I do think the Spartans are probably the second best team in this Eastern Division. I think they're better than Michigan. I think at this point they're probably better than Penn State without Sean Clifford. So we'll see whether if Clifford's back. That's a different story, obviously.
No, we'll go ahead.
Yeah, but I think Michigan State's a very good team. But you're right; they haven't really faced a ton yet. So we'll have to see whether if Indiana can maybe hang around for a while, if they can be physical. I don't know how Rutgers is a physical team, but they don't have the athletes to match Michigan State. Indiana has the physicality and the athletes on defense. I think we're going to see whether Michigan State is prepared for that.
Forrest checks in, says, I'm afraid if Indiana can't stop the run and find a running game, it could be a long day. I think I agree with half of that for sure. Definitely they need to be able to stop Kenneth Walker to an extent. I don't think you're going to be able to completely stop him with as elite of a back as he is. But on the other side of things, I think at this point in the season, I can confidently say Indiana's not going to have opponent running attack with the issues you've had on the offensive line. I think Stephen Carr is good, but I don't think he has enough help to be able for Indiana to be able to have a just straight traditional running game. He'll have to be used as an extension of the run game by using short passes and having him get open and stuff like that. So I feel like the fact that Michigan State doesn't have an elite defense like Indiana has faced so far this season, I think they can get by with a decent passing attack as long as they're able to have an attack period, because obviously they've had them offensive struggles throughout the season. But as I said earlier, I think Jack Tuttle might be able to provide that spark that's been missing.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about the run game. Indiana just hasn't been able to run the ball with any kind of consistency this year. It's tough because with DJ Matthews in the fold, they might have been able to kind of fashion a run game with a combination of essentially screen passes and swing passes to Matthews, get the ball on the outside and get him into space, which is basically what a running game is supposed to do anyway, is get athletes into space. But Matthews is out now too, and that kind of robs Indiana of their best athlete at the skill position. So I think that they might try to do the same thing with Walker, with Carr, I should say. And the biggest thing is finding ways to get him the ball in space. Purdue has done a good job of this the last couple of years as they've struggled to run the ball. When Xander Horvath is healthy, they've done a really good job of getting him the ball in the passing game. And that's basically functioned as a quasi-run game for them because he's so shifty, he can get the ball in space and do something with it, even in passes. And I think that's something that Indiana has to look at with Stephen Carr, because he is very, very talented. But he's kind of being wasted behind an offensive line that can't really open up enough holes for him to really realize how good he can be.
Yeah, we'll just have to see. We'll discuss more Indiana-Michigan State in the battle for the old brass platoon a little bit later. Coming up, we'll dive a little more into some of the Big Ten games going on in the conference this weekend as well. But we're going to go ahead and take our first break here. Thanks for listening, guys. We'll be right back after this. Indiana Sports Beat Radio brought to you by Southern Stone Restaurant. Back after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington and Southern Stone Restaurant.
Whether it's a celebration.
So this is actually a first. This is the longest Jim has taken to check in at all.
Okay.
Even though I've already talked to him this morning. Excuse me. What he's done is usually he's come in, he'll start the show, and then he might step out for a second, come back in, step out, do all that stuff.
I got you.
There is a chance he might have fallen back asleep. But are you comfortable talking more Big Ten when we come back, and like not just Indiana, and we can talk other Big Ten games and maybe
Sure.
And plus you cover Notre Dame, don't you?
I do, yeah.
Do they play this weekend?
They do not. They have a bye
Of
this
course.
week. So,
Of course they don't play this week.
we can still talk about them though. I have takes.
Okay. And the Purdue-Iowa matchup's interesting. I know you cover pretty much everything around the area, don't you?
Yeah, essentially. Notre Dame is my main focus, but obviously I do plenty of IU and Purdue.
Mm-hmm. Man, another thing's going to cause me crap later on after the show is I forgot on my end, like obviously I could hear you can hear me, but on one of the things that I use to produce the show, I forgot to unmute your mic so it wasn't recording your audio. So that's going to screw with me later on when I'm editing this. A lot to think about when you're trying to host a show and make sure everything's running correctly at the same time.
Yeah, I'm sorry, man. Yeah, if there's
it's not your fault. It's gone well. This has been a crazy week, man. I feel bad for Jim dealing what he's dealing with, but I would think he might feel better by Monday, but I don't want to say that and be wrong. After this segment, I may text him and just see if he's awake.
Yeah.
Or I might just text him now. Tell him we're fine, but if you're awake, feel free to join us. And we have Zach Osterman joining us at 10 as well.
Okay, great.
Supposedly.
Yeah, talk to him more about IU for sure.
Oh, he's here. Hey, Jim.
What's up, man?
We just finished up talking a little Indiana, Michigan State. We were going to go into the rest of the Big Ten schedule, but if you want to go a different direction, that's fine.
You guys can do whatever you want.
Hey, Jim.
Hey, brother, how are you?
Not bad.
All right, we got about 10-ish seconds.
Right now, get free checking with online banking and all the products of big city banks with hometown service.
With First Federal, you can do that.
This segment is brought to you by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington and Southern Stone Restaurant.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back on this Friday. Thanks a lot, John and Dylan, for getting things started. Let's see. Where were you guys? Where did you leave off? We're talking football?
Yeah, talking Indiana, Michigan State.
Yeah, that's going to be I was talking to Dustin Schutte yesterday, and it's funny how this game has now taken on the look opposite of how I viewed it 2 months ago, of what it was going to be like with Indiana having a high-power offense, the team that could be 6-0 going undefeated going into this game, and it's Michigan State that has the high-powered offense that's undefeated going into this game. Statistically, they went offensively from averaging 5 yards a play to 7.5 yards per play this season, and that is a humongous jump. First of all, but that 2.5 yards, 7.5 yards per play, that means you're going downhill constantly on each drive. They're probably getting very good first down chunk yardage, and because one of the things I looked at for Indiana, man, if they have anything less than like a 3rd and 2, their success rate percentage on conversions it's well under 50%. If it's 3rd and 3 or 4 or 5, 6, 7, they're just not. Of course, it makes a lot of sense with the offense the way that it is. But Jack Tuttle this week, he's going to be in there. I don't know how much difference that's going to make. Hopefully, it does for Indiana. It will make a difference, but we'll have to see. The offensive line is the same. Offensive coordinator is the same. So it's going to be an interesting game. They've had 2 weeks off, though, Dylan, to get this revamped or whatever the case may be. I think they're going to have to start opening up the playbook a little bit because they haven't shown me. I talked about this yesterday. I don't understand why they've not tried to make adjustments. If they're having offensive line problems, okay, call more rollouts. Where's the jet sweeps? Play action pass. I'm not just. It's not a quick hitting offense, and I think that's hurting them right now because they don't have a great offensive line. So you kind of need to do some things a little bit different, but they're not.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the biggest thing is, and maybe after the bye week that will change. They'll put some different things in. I do think in terms of Michigan State, you talked about their offense. The biggest thing for them is that they're pretty reliant on big plays. They scored 4 touchdowns against Rutgers. I want to make sure I get this right. The touchdowns were of 63, 63, 65, and 94 yards. They won that game 31-13. I don't they don't put together a ton of long sustained drives. So if Indiana can avoid big plays and get off the field on offense, they might have on defense, they might have a little bit of success. But as you said, I do agree with you about Indiana's offense. They do need to do some things to move the pocket, give whoever is the quarterback some time to throw, and whether that's with rollouts, whether that's with extra protection, and whether that's with kind of 1, 2, 3, get the ball out, quick hitters. And I think that after the bye week, maybe they'll have done a little bit of an assessment of here's where we are, here's where we need to get better. And you have to hope that they'll come out with maybe their best game plan of the year against one of the best opponents they faced.
All right, looks like we lost Jim there for a second. Maybe he'll hop back in a moment. But let's take a look at some of these Big Ten games. Other than Indiana, Michigan State, we've got Nebraska, Minnesota, Rutgers, Northwestern, Purdue, number 2, Iowa, and Army, Wisconsin. Wisconsin, the only out of conference matchup. Are you back with us, Jim?
Yeah, I didn't know I left. My bad.
Okay. I was about to jump into the rest of the conference matchups, but.
Go right ahead. Go into that. I can't see a lot of that, so go right ahead. Go into
it. Excuse me. All right, so yeah, jumping in. Purdue, number 2, Iowa. This matchup is interesting simply because Jeff Brom currently owns the series against Kirk Ferentz for as long as he's been the Purdue head coach. I believe he's only lost once. Iowa currently ranked number 2 and undefeated. This game is in Kinnick Stadium. Purdue, so far, they don't really seem to have the offensive prowess, I should say, that they're known for having. Aiden O'Connell's been struggling. Jeff Brom did say yesterday that he is going to be the starter instead of Jack Plummer against Iowa. So I think Iowa has another chance to continue their interceptions, and I think they lead the country with 20 turnovers. So I think it'll be interesting to see if Purdue is able to kind of mitigate that at all and make this a competitive game.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for Purdue is they've had success. You talked about Brom having success against Iowa. They're 3-1 against Iowa under Brom, and he kind of laid it out pretty starkly on Monday. He said that when they've had success against Iowa, they've done it by hitting some big plays over the top and then kind of holding their ground on defense. He said, basically just said it plainly, Iowa doesn't allow those big plays anymore. Like Iowa, this year's version of Iowa is like all the previous versions of Iowa, except significantly better. And so it's going to be a difficult task for Purdue because they haven't really hit a ton of big plays this year anyway. You talked about O'Connell. He did take over for Jack Plummer in week 5, led them against Minnesota, I should say, a game they lost 20-13, despite outgaining Minnesota by about 150 yards, getting 28 first downs to Minnesota's 12. So O'Connell's the guy right now. He only averaged about 7.1 yards per attempt, and they put the ball in the air 52 times in that game. So it's just a question of whether they can sustain drives against this Iowa defense, because the defense is not. We saw this against Penn State and Sean Clifford. The defense is not super formidable if you can avoid turnovers, right? Like, obviously, they are fantastic at what they do, and that is force other teams into mistakes. But if you can play mistake-free football, you can move the ball against Iowa. Penn State moved the ball against Iowa before Sean Clifford got hurt. He did throw 2 interceptions, and that hurt them, but he also scored 17 points in a quarter and a half. So the question is whether Purdue can avoid the turnovers. I don't think they'll be able to with as much as they throw, because like Indiana, they have not been able to run the ball hardly at all this year. Although O'Connell's ability to push the ball down the field a little bit did seem to open things up for the run game a little bit. So we'll see whether that continues. I think the bigger question to me is whether they bring in quarterback Austin Burton a little bit. He's kind of more of a running threat, and maybe give him some snaps and have him add something in the run game that can maybe take some pressure off of O'Connell. But yeah, Purdue, they were Iowa's won 12 games in a row. Purdue was one of the last teams to beat them at the start of last season. They won 21-20 behind 3 touchdowns from David Bell. So I would expect a lot of Bell in this game.
It's interesting because Iowa is their current defense is very similar to the way Indiana played defense last year. They rely very heavily on the turnovers, and I would be curious to see if this Hawkeye defense, if they would be nearly as successful if they weren't getting some of those breaks. Obviously, when you're forcing so many turnovers, it's not luck at this point. But there's obviously, when you have 20 of them, not all of them are going to be ones that you cause to happen. Sometimes they bounce into your hands, especially with an interception. So I'm curious to see. I don't know if Iowa's had a game this year, which is why I said it's so potent and important to their defense, where they haven't forced turnovers to help them win the game.
I think that's exactly right. They won against IU in large part because of the 2 pick sixes Michael Penix threw. They won against Iowa State because of turnovers. They clearly won against Penn State in large part because of turnovers and obviously Clifford getting hurt. So I don't think Iowa's offense is good enough to win them a game if they need to. Quarterback Spencer Petras is averaging like 6.8 yards per attempt. That's not particularly good. Tyler Goodson is a good running back. He is not a great running back, and I don't think their offense can win them a game if they're forced to. And the one thing that maybe gives Purdue a little bit of hope is that it seems like Iowa's best cornerback, Riley Moss, he is tied for the nation's lead in interceptions with 4. Seems like he might not play this week. He wasn't on their depth chart. Obviously, that could change going into Saturday, but he did get hurt against Penn State. So we'll see whether he's in there. If not, the defense becomes just slightly less formidable. Of course, then you still have guys that have combined for 13 interceptions out there, 12 interceptions out there. So we'll see. I do think if Purdue can avoid turnovers, they can move the ball. It's just a question of avoiding turnovers, and they throw the ball so much that it's going to be tough.
I'm not sure if you said this earlier, but are you in the camp of, if Sean Clifford doesn't come out of the game, that Penn State pulls out the win since they were ahead 17-3?
Oh, I absolutely am. I'm an AP voter, and
okay.
I thought long and hard about putting Penn State above Iowa in the poll this week. I didn't end up doing it just because at some point you kind of have to let head-to-head results matter. But I thought a lot about it because Penn State with Sean Clifford, Penn State's the better team. I am not quite a believer in Iowa yet. I know their fans are going to get on me for that. And they do have some decent wins, but IU's not as good as anyone thought they were going to be. Iowa State's not as good as anyone thought they were going to be. And they should have lost that game to Penn State, possibly by a touchdown or 2, quite frankly. Because that's the thing is everyone. It's always tough bringing in your backup quarterback, but some teams have backup quarterbacks like IU that know most of the offense and can move the ball a little bit. Penn State did absolutely nothing with that backup quarterback. And now you play who's in front of you if you're Iowa, but they couldn't throw the ball at all. I don't know if they got a first down with their backup quarterback in the game after scoring 17 points in a quarter and a half with Clifford in. So the drop off there was so immediate and so drastic that I think you kind of have to go on the assumption that Penn State would have won that game had Clifford played, because they still only lost 23-20, playing with a quarterback who couldn't do anything for 2.5 quarters.
One more thing before we move on to something else, but what is your stance on this whole feud, I guess, between James Franklin and Kirk Ferentz? Because every day it seems like there's a new wrinkle that's revealed and someone's coming out and saying something. James Franklin in particular has been very vocal about it in his press briefings.
I mean, Kirk Ferentz did everything but kind of accuse James Franklin's players of taking a dive, right? Like I just don't understand how you're Iowa and you think that these guys are faking injuries to slow down the Iowa tempo. Iowa is one of the slower teams in the country in terms of how they run offense. So it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. Iowa to me is one of the more we see teams every once in a while that like they break into the top four and they're not Alabama or Clemson, so it's kind of fun and exciting. And Iowa is one of the more unlikable upstarts that I've ever seen. They are not gaining many fans as this season goes on, and people kind of figure out like that they are winning these games, and that we're going to have to talk about them the rest of the year. Boy, it's sometimes it's not a lot of fun following them because they're just not interested in making friends.
A couple more games before we take a break here. Nebraska at Minnesota. I think it's interesting. It feels like from a Nebraska perspective and a Scott Frost perspective and I feel like we say this every week anytime we talk about a Nebraska game, but it's a must win for them.
Yeah, I what I would say is you kind of say this tongue in cheek, but if I was Scott Frost, I wouldn't lose this game. I will say I do think we talked about Michigan State's schedule. Nebraska is the best team that Michigan State has beaten this year. Nebraska is a good team that cannot get out of its own way. They should have beaten Michigan State. They messed up a punt return that cost them that game. They should have beaten Michigan. They had a chance to go down the field and kick a winning field goal, and they fumbled, and Michigan got the winning field goal instead. This is a good team that cannot get out of its own way. And I mean, that part of that goes back to coaching. If you do not have a disciplined team, then that falls in large part on the coach. And so the criticism of Scott Frost is fair, I think. But also, I think that I'm a Michigan fan. I've been a Michigan fan my entire life, so I watched the game against Nebraska closely last week. Scott Frost is still one of the best play callers in the country. He designs these plays that really put the defense in significant binds and make it difficult to cover. And I think a lot of their offense comes from him, from Adrian Martinez's individual brilliance, first of all, and Scott Frost being a great play caller and putting his offense in good positions. And I think he'll do that this week against a Minnesota team that just isn't very good.
Two more quickly. Army at Wisconsin. Dustin and I talked about this earlier this week on the podcast. He took Army in this one. I took Wisconsin, but I don't really blame him because Wisconsin supposedly has the worst red zone offense in the Big Ten. In the way that you'll have to score points on an Army team who's likely going to put points on you, that's kind of a tough matchup for them.
It is, and I think that's the thing with Army is that when they're going to slow the game down so much and shrink the game, and so when you have opportunities in the red zone, you're going to need to take advantage of them. And Wisconsin just hasn't done that this year almost at all. I do think they have a very good run defense, but the triple option isn't really a traditional run offense in the way that we think of a ground game. So it's always a crapshoot as to how a team is going to fare against the triple option. Obviously, Wisconsin has the better athletes and should have something for Army. Scheduling this game, that is tough for Wisconsin. Their schedule so far has been basically it was Penn State, Michigan, Notre Dame, Central Michigan was in there, and then Army. And boy, is that tough. There's no let up for them, especially.
And sometimes you don't realize when you schedule these non-conference games, and we talk about this with Indiana and Cincinnati, how good they're going to be when you end up playing them.
Right, but that's the thing is with Army is one of the few teams that you know is going to be a pain in the butt, even if they're not any good. Facing the triple option in the middle of the season is obnoxious. Like it's something.
Indiana struggled when they played Navy. I believe they lost both times when they played Navy in a 2-game series under Kevin Wilson.
It doesn't matter how good or not good those teams are. They're just going to make life hard for you. So it's tough that Wisconsin has to play them in the middle of the Big Ten season. I do wonder, I'm not sure, I haven't really heard a whole lot about this, is whether Graham Mertz is going to play against Army. He took that huge shot against Michigan a couple of weeks ago that knocked him out of the game, actually sent him to the hospital with shot to his midsection. So the question is whether he plays, and if not, how much that offense changes, because he'd been struggling himself, obviously.
One more battle of two Big Ten traditional cellar dwellers. I guess you can say Northwestern's not really a traditional cellar dweller, but you got Rutgers and Northwestern. Northwestern's a team, 1 year they're going to be challenging for the Big Ten West. The following year they're going to be potentially 2-10, 3-9, something like that. And this seems to be one of those seasons where Northwestern is trending toward that bottom tier of the Big Ten. And Rutgers, on the other hand, they've shown some improvement, but the past two games they've looked less than average, I would say, especially against Ohio State.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think Rutgers is significantly improved. I think they win this game. Northwestern is not good at all this season. You're absolutely right that this is one of the years where they're going to finish toward the bottom of the league. The Northwestern Illinois game at the end of the season might be for
a battle for last place.
Yes, exactly. So I do think Rutgers wins this game. I think they're improved. They just don't have the athletes to hang with the best teams yet. But Greg Schiano has that team moving in the right direction. They hung with Michigan. They hung with Michigan State for a little while. Obviously, did not hang with Ohio State. But no one is at this point. So yeah, I do expect them to win this game, get one step closer to bowl eligibility, which would be a great feather in Schiano's cap in year two after the dumpster fire that he took over with that program.
Well, there you go. There's the Big Ten slate for week 7. We're going to go ahead and take another break here, bring Jim Coyle back in to take over things, probably talk a little bit of basketball. We got Zach Osterman coming up. So just keep it right here with us. We got keep on listening to Indiana Sports Beat Radio, brought to you by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington. We're back after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington and Southern Stone Restaurants. Whether you're looking...
Great job, Jim. Great job, John.
No problem.
I do
quickly
think
find some music.
I do think Rutgers gets to bowl eligibility this year. Looking at their schedule, they have Northwestern, Illinois, the next two, and then they just have to win one of Wisconsin, IU, and Maryland near the end.
I wanted to ask you: do you think they'll beat Indiana?
This
current.
But see, if Indiana needs that win to be bowl eligible.
Yeah, it's going to be a swing. It's one of those kind of swing games where it's not really clear who's going to be better at that point in the season. I would expect Rutgers probably to win that game, but.
Really?
I'm really down on IU. I'm more down on IU than most people are. I think that they're just not very good, and it's kind of sad.
It doesn't make sense either. Mostly same talent there, mostly.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that they had some turnover luck last year. They losing Jamar Johnson hurt. But yeah, I think last year was a little bit of smoke and mirrors. So it's tough. Their talent is definitely still much improved from where it was 3 or 4 years ago. It's just the Big Ten is now back to where it was 3 or 4 years ago.
I think Kalen DeVore may be the difference.
That would not surprise me. I think that Sheridan has kind of been a little bit unimaginative this year. I think you're absolutely right about the idea that it's been pretty obvious all year the offensive line isn't quite as good as they thought it was going to be, and you need to be able to adjust in that case, and they haven't yet. So we'll see if they do come out of the bye.
Man, you can hear a pin drop now. I'm going real quiet.
I'm gonna let you keep going. I'm gonna stay in, but man,
do you want to talk a little basketball? I was going to
have to talk basketball. There's a ton.
I was going to say if you didn't come in, my next move was going to be to talk a little Big Ten Media Days and with Dylan out. Dylan, did you do anything with that this past weekend?
I was there. I wrote stories on IU men and women. I wrote stories on Purdue men and women. I am all over it.
Okay, then we can do that. Jim, do you want me to keep taking the reins? What do you want me to do?
Zach's at 10, and we don't have anybody else after that. I couldn't get the Rivals guys, so.
Do you want to do this segment? Like, do you want to introduce coming back? What do you want to happen here? We got about 15 seconds.
I'll bring us in.
Okay.
but stay in though.
All good.
I got nothing.
More Honda now in Bloomington.
This segment is brought to you by Aurora Specialty Sleep Clinic. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington and Southern Stone Restaurant.
Welcome back. It is a TGIF day. Thank goodness it is Friday. Day before game day, Dylan, and you guys have been talking about Michigan State a lot. That's a big game tomorrow for Indiana, homecoming, and all that pomp and circumstance that goes with that. So hopefully that turns out well. A lot going on up around Assembly Hall, but before I get there, staying on football for a second, Josh Hoover is taking his official visit to Indiana this weekend. He was going to join us today, but he's like, "Oh man, I'll be on a plane then." He's flying to Bloomington right now to make his official visit. And we had talked about, man, this kid's a superstar. He could probably go a lot of different places, especially now.
I mean, he seems to be a guy they're really excited about. And obviously he had offers from all over the place. Arkansas really wanted him, and being a kid from Texas, to get him away from Arkansas is significant for IU. And so it's as they kind of look toward the future here. It's you want to make sure that you give these guys even though the season hasn't gone the way you wanted to, you want to make sure that the bump in recruiting that you've gotten in recent years and recent months, you want to make sure those recruits stay in the fold, still believe in the trajectory of the program. And so I think that's going to be a very important part of the rest of the season. Is obviously getting to bowl eligibility is extremely important, but making these recruits still feel that the program is on an upward trajectory, even if the results on the field haven't been there like they were last year. And so being competitive in these games against the Big Ten's top teams is really important. Showing them the atmosphere at Memorial Stadium is going to be really important. They're expecting another sellout or close to it against Michigan State tomorrow. They're opening the gates early again. So you want to give these kids a reason to say IU isn't playing as well as they did last year, but I still believe in where this program is going, and keep them in the fold as recruits.
I think we lost Jim again, but that's all good. I mean, this has been a fun week, guys. We never know what's going to happen on the fly here with all the stuff we've been dealing with. But I'm going to go ahead and transition us into Big Ten Media Days. Dylan, you said you were there covering Indiana men's and women's basketball, and as well as Purdue. So there's a lot of stuff going on. A lot of hype coming up for all four teams. Purdue women, I know, have a brand new coach. Obviously, is on top of Mike Woodson being a new coach for Indiana. So a couple new young bucks. Mike Woodson, not so much a young buck, but he is a young buck in terms of the college game. So just give me some of your initial thoughts. I don't care who you talk about. What's your big takeaway from last week's Big Ten Media Days?
My big takeaway, at least for IU basketball, we can start there. My big takeaway is the same takeaway I've had kind of since even before the Bahamas. Basically, IU needs to find one shooter outside of Miller Kopp, and they will have a successful season. That is my big mood for Indiana basketball. If Miller Kopp is a shooter, and if Indiana can find one other guy, they will be a successful team overall this season. And they are looking for him in different places. They believe that Parker Stewart can shoot. Well, we were still hoping that he can do that. But they're looking to guys who have been there to shoot. And that starts with Rob Finney and Race Thompson even, because both of those guys said at Big Ten Media Day that Woodson has been getting on them repeatedly to shoot the ball when they have the opportunity. Thompson told this story where they watch film before practice, and Woodson, if he feels that Thompson had a shot in practice that he didn't take, he'll stop the tape and he'll ask Thompson, "What do I want you to do there?" Thompson will say, "Shoot it." Woodson will rewind the tape, stop it again. "What do I want you to do?" "Shoot it." And he said basically he'll keep going until Race says loud enough that Woodson is satisfied. So he's kind of trying to drill that into them. And
it's crazy that it seems evident under the last regime that no one was comfortable shooting the ball. You wonder why this team couldn't put up points. It seems very evident based on what you were just saying. Why would anybody be afraid to shoot the ball?
Right.
Archie Miller must have been. I know he was a defensive guy, but even that wasn't so good for him. Archie Miller was a disaster in all ways, shapes, and forms. And it's crazy that Mike Woodson is having.
Coach in America. What are you talking about?
It's crazy that Mike Woodson is having to drill something like that, especially into somebody like Rob Finney, who is a guard. We wonder why he hasn't been able to live up to his potential. That likely has a lot to do with it right there.
Yeah, I think it was definitely a confidence thing with Rob Finney, especially last year, but also with Race. He hasn't been an outside shooter at IU, and they're kind of hoping that he can be at least a little bit this year, maybe 17 feet, something like that. And Race said that he just feels a little bit more when someone tells you that they want you to do something like that over and over and over again. He says it makes you feel like you can do it. It gives you a little bit more confidence. And Finney said the same thing. It's just a confidence thing. And so if someone, we know Miller Kopp can shoot. We saw it in Bahamas. If someone else can shoot and stretch the floor just a little bit, I think Indiana is going to have a good season. Now, I don't know if they have another shooter on that team. Parker Stewart, they think, is that guy. We haven't seen it yet. So they've talked about it repeatedly in practice. We will see. And I think that the season might come down to whether they can find that second guy.
Well, Race was on with me last week at Big Ten Media Days, and he talked about his shooting, and that he's not afraid to shoot the ball, and that he's capable of shooting the ball, and looking forward to it. That Coach Mike Woodson is using them in different ways, bringing the ball up the floor, different things, getting those guys involved. The offer went out yesterday for what's that kid's name? Josh Harrelson, is that right?
It's
Fishers.
I don't know if it's Josh Harrelson. That was a former Kentucky player. I'm trying to think of which Harrelson it is, though.
It's a Harrelson. I can't remember. Starts with a J. Jalen, something like that. But anyway, he's a 2025 kid, so he's way off. But he's a 6'6" point guard.
Yeah.
And looks pretty damn good for as young as he is. I've seen some videos, and I'm like, wow. But this is the prototype player that Mike Woodson is looking for. If he can get a 6'6" point guard and 6'7" wings and 6'9" guys down below, all of them almost not interchangeable, but that can play a 4-5, a 3-4, a 1-2. When you have 5 guys on the floor that can play 2 positions, which is what he's trying to build, that makes it very difficult to defend because everybody's the shooter. Everybody can get to the rim. And it's just it is an NBA style of play, and he's gearing towards that. And personnel matters at least. But he's doing a good job. He's getting the recruits, hasn't landed everybody yet, but this is the Harrelson kid is. He picked up an offer from Maryland this week. And like I said, he's a 2025 kid, man. He's not even going to be here while most of the kids are in school at Indiana. By the time he comes to play here, they'll be gone and graduated. But he's someone that obviously is very coveted by programs. Not too many 2025 kids get scholarship offers from Big Ten schools. He's not just any kid, though. Xavier Booker, Cathedral, another one of those type guys that he's a big 6'10", but he likes stepping out on the perimeter and putting some shots up. And he's built he's kind of Kevin Garnett built body wise. And so that's, man, the game is so different now. They can do so many things, and it's position wise, and it's crazy. But that is exactly what Mike Woodson is trying to build in Bloomington.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I mean, obviously, if this kid is 2025 kid, Mike Woodson obviously looking toward the future and kind of really, it's good that he's really diving into the whole recruiting aspect of going out and building relationships with these kids, trying to get in on them early because he doesn't have the experience. We've talked about that ad nauseum, of course, with Woodson not having the experience in recruiting. And so I think it's good for him to get in early on these kids and kind of establish who he is and what he wants IU to be and basically take IU basketball's brand, his brand that he wants to put on it, on the recruiting trail as early as possible. I think that's probably a good idea for him. And I do think that as for this season specifically, I do think they're going to try to play mostly positionless basketball outside of Trace, right? Like I don't think they're going to have Trace bring the ball up the floor very often. I think they're going to play probably 4 out and let Trace kind of work in the middle and try to give him as much space as possible. And that goes back to where the shooting comes in, because if you have the shooting, you can give Trace some space. And I think that's give him just some opportunities to maneuver. Obviously, they're going to have him on the perimeter a little bit, but I still think his bread and butter is going to be down low. And so it's going to be important for them to be able to stretch the floor in that way.
Noah Clowney, another high-profile recruit for Indiana, has moved his decision date up to Halloween, October 31st. We talked a little bit about this yesterday. John will be wearing his clown email outfit. But that I don't know if that's good news or bad news, or maybe no. He's just probably tired of dealing with it. He rescheduled and was able to get his Alabama visit in. I think Alabama's probably, if Indiana has competition, I'd say it's Alabama. He's from South Carolina, so that'd be in the South, and they run. And I don't know how much he wants to run, because they shoot a ton of threes now. So I know everyone likes that, but I'm not sure how a running 3 team, how a 6'10" guy will fit into that. But that's a lot of running. But he can shoot all he wants at Indiana if he can hit them. I'm certain Mike Woodson will not be opposed to anybody shooting out there. If they're hitting, he didn't care. But I have a feeling they're in good position here, but it's hard to tell. The reason I think that, though, is because of Mike Woodson, knowing that position so well, played that position, not quite as big as him, but in the NBA, coaching in the NBA, knows how to get this kid to the NBA. That's just got to weigh heavy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do wonder, obviously, moving up to Halloween means that he is done with his college decision by the start of his own high school basketball season. Maybe he wants to get his decision out of the way before his high school season starts, which obviously is something that you don't want weighing on you during the season. So that there's a possibility that rather than one team jumping into the lead, it was more just he kind of knew what he wanted, and he wanted to get that done before his season starts. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. That would be another great pickup in the 2022 class for IU, which is already looking fairly good going forward, because they did keeping CJ Gunn in the fold was important as well. So IU basketball has kind of returned to the recruiting trail in a way that they were struggling to do at the end of Archie Miller's tenure.
Kind of struggling all through that tenure, but I talked about that as well. Look at the impact of players Mike Woodson's been able to get in here, and he's not done. But not only was not being done, they are, as you mentioned, they're already looking at the future with Harrelson and from the 2025 class, and Dane just flew to Finland to watch Milo kid play.
I did see that, and the kid was apparently very impressed that IU flew all the way out there. I don't know how many other schools have done that, but he seemed to be very impressed that IU was out there in person to see him.
Apparently not a lot. If he's that impressed by it, it kind of reminded me of was it Caleb Glenn from Louisville Male, who I really thought Indiana had a great shot at landing. He's from Louisville Male High School, but Chris Mack, the U of L coach, showed up there one day at 5 o'clock in the morning to watch him during his workouts, because he would work out every day at 5. And I remember reading how impressed he was with that. That may have been what sealed the deal for them getting him. And this could be that very thing for this kid. He obviously wants to come to America to play basketball, but when you get someone like that, and he's impressed that they did that, and then once he goes back and starts looking at the history and all of that, it'll probably be a pretty good selling point.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sending Dane Fife out there is interesting too. Dane Fife has been all over the place. I keep seeing him pop up at all these different places he's obviously working extremely hard on the recruiting trail here early, which of course is what IU wanted, especially when they hired him, was to be kind of one of those bridges for Mike Woodson, a guy who has been on the recruiting trail for years in college, has some of these relationships. Obviously doesn't have any relationships in Finland, I don't think, but in general, kind of being the guy who can introduce Mike Woodson to some of these high school coaches. I think he's played that role very well between him and Kenya Hunter and even Thad Matta. I think IU has done a good job of putting together a staff that should be formidable on the recruiting trail.
The one thing about an international student, they cannot participate in the NIL program.
Yeah, so
it's a weird deal. Because I'm sitting there thinking, man, he can have Finlandia vodka, virtually any vodka, really, because most of them are made over there.
Yeah, I do wonder whether that would be something that obviously this is way in the future if he ever does commit to IU, but it would be interesting to see how that kind of plays out in terms of what happens with him when he's like, how does that work? Is there a loophole that the NCAA would close where he can do it when he's here? So we'll have to see. That would be interesting.
I don't understand why that is the case, or is that, I wonder if that is to prevent people from bringing in just boatloads of talent and nefarious ways outside of the country. Other than that, I don't know why it would be an issue.
It seems odd to me, of course, but far be it from me to ever wonder what the NCAA is doing at this point.
You got that right. But they said, the NCAA is truly the university presidents. I'm trying to think of a funny name for them. The Upers, university presidents. That's what they should call it, the Uper, instead of the NCAA. But because he's at the behest of the college presidents. They make the shots. They make the calls. The NCAA does some things, but they don't do a lot without the permission of the higher ups.
Right, and that's the main thing. Is that it's nice to have Mark Emmert as a guy who can go out in public. It's kind of like Roger Goodell, where it's the guy who, or Rob Manfred, quite frankly, goes out in public and kind of takes a little bit of the and takes a little bit of the public heat from the people who made the actual decision. And I think that's kind of Mark Emmert's main use at this point for the NCAA.
Hey, we're late for a break, and we'll have to do that. Back with Zach Osterman after this. You're listening to Indiana Sports Beat Radio, coming to you from the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios. Brought to you by our good friends at Aurora Specialty Sleep Clinic in Indianapolis. Dr. Steve Green, Brian Evans will give you the nights of sleep that you have not been getting. Check them out. They're on Statesman Drive up in Indianapolis. Back with more right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington and Southern Stone Restaurant.
If you're in the market.
Zach is in.
Hey, sorry.
Hey, Zach.
Oh, you're good. We just broke anyway, so you're good. Jim, are you going to need me for this segment, or when we come back, do you want me to drop out this time?
Probably drop this time.
Gotcha.
But stay close.
Yeah. I'll go ahead and shut my camera off, though.
Hey, Zach, how are you doing, man?
Oh, I'm all right. How about you?
I'm dying, but other than that, I'm great.
Yeah, I don't feel. I was talking to John. I don't feel very good either. It's just been.
I got a neck and back issue going on that I've been dealing with. It's not getting better.
Yeah.
I don't know how I'm gonna go to the damn game tomorrow.
You'll have Keegan there.
Well, I understand that, but there's a lot of stuff that I do that
I
can't do.
I know he can't do everything. Just saying.
I was gonna say, Zach, are you gonna make it to the game tomorrow?
I don't know. I've had a stomach thing for the last about 36 hours. It's also got me with a little bit of a low-grade fever and everything. So,
Oh man.
yeah,
We appreciate you coming on anyway.
I'm sitting here drinking a cup of coffee, but that's basically, I'm not going to lie, that's kind of that's a value proposition between the coffee and the fever versus the energy I need from it. So, I mean, it's just what it is. So, yeah.
Do you have anything coming out that, or whatever your most recent thing is? I read something.
I haven't really done much this week, to be honest. I've been working ahead on a couple of big projects, primarily one on the 50th anniversary of Assembly Hall.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. No, I've talked.
When will that come out?
Hopefully sometime early in November. So it's not. I don't know if I'd quite tease it yet.
I was going to say it's a little early to do that for you.
A firm run date, but I mean, I've talked to I don't know, Digger Phelps. I talked to Ken Nunn. That was fun.
Oh, I've seen him driving around in his Rolls, man.
Yeah, I was gonna say, did he let you drive? He let you take a ride in the Rolls?
No.
That would have been great.
Right, here we go. Coming back.
Craft beers and all of the right foods to go with. Plan a day on the links at Eagle Point in Bloomington, then stay for dinner at Sam's Clubhouse. Sam's Restaurants, professionals in the art of food and drink. This segment is brought to you by Yogi's Bar and Grill. Now back to the golf club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington and Southern Stone Restaurant.
Welcome back. It is Friday, and that means we have the pleasure of talking to Zach Osterman from the Indy Star. I almost said Indianapolis Star, which is actually correct, but no one calls it that. We all say the Indy Star. But have they made it? I think they've made their official name Indy Star, haven't they?
Yeah,
because I even see them promoting.
That's kind of the brand at this point, basically. So you can say either way, and I'll if I'm contacting someone in market, I'll probably say Indy Star. If I'm contacting somebody for a story, maybe I don't know, I want to talk to, a football player's high school coach or something, and he's from Florida, I'll probably say the Indianapolis Star. Because it's a little bit less colloquial to people that don't live around here, but
right on. A lot of visits coming this weekend, both for football and basketball, actually. Josh Hoover is here this weekend from Texas, the quarterback. He's thrown for over 2,000 yards this season, 68% completion rating. I think it was 24 touchdowns with 2 interceptions. This kid is something different, man. He's going to be good to get in the fold next year.
Yeah, I mean, he is one. I remember either I or Blau, I can't remember which one of us now, talked to his high school coach, and basically the way the high school coach described it, because I think his only Power 5 offer at the time was Arkansas when IU offered and he committed to IU. And the way the coach described it was Nick Sheridan was basically just like, what am I missing here? Like I'm looking at his film, I'm talking to the kid, I'm looking at his stats, I'm evaluating everything about him, like why does he not have a higher profile, basically? And so, I mean, obviously it can be cliche to say, Texas, toughest place, high school football to play and all that. But I mean, like where he's playing, it is very difficult. I mean, unless I'm mistaken, he's from the Metroplex.
Yeah, Dallas area.
Dallas. And I mean, like there's really not a lot of places you can go for easy wins in that part of the country in high school football. The numbers he's putting up this year, but even I think just through his career in general, have been really impressive. And, if you're Indiana, I mean, I think Indiana fans should know by now that quarterback depth can be just as important, frankly, as top line quarterback talent anymore. That's just the reality of that position. And you've got to have multiple guys that you can trust in those situations. I mean, do you even think about the number 1 team in the country right now? University of Georgia starting Stetson Bennett at quarterback right now. That's just that reality of that position is you've got to have multiple guys you can trust. I mean, Indiana, obviously, I think Indiana fans are worried about this weekend, and I understand why. But they'd probably be a heck of a lot more worried if it were someone like Dexter Williams, let's say, than Jack Tuttle. And that's not a knock on Dexter Williams. He's never thrown a college pass. But if you're Indiana, maybe one thing you can take solace from if Michael Penix is out, and we'll find out Saturday if he is that the guy behind him is incredibly trustworthy. And that's why you want depth at quarterback. And that's why you want to be able to recruit at a level that obviously, if you're Indiana, it's probably less than ideal if Josh Hoover's taking snaps in 2022. But if he's taking snaps in 2024 as your primary backup, or even 2025 as your starter, whatever it is, this is the value of depth, and again, I'd also say Indiana fans don't have to go very far to remember seasons that were derailed by, basically just one quarterback injury. So it just that is a position where you always need to have depth. You always need, it's really easy to get hung up on saying, well, this guy's the starter, he's the only one I need to worry about, but that's just not the case.
No, I think you just look last week at Penn State and Iowa. When Sean Clifford goes down, Penn State was just, I'm not going to say dominating the game, but they were controlling the game. And I thought that they were going to go on to a relatively easy win. He goes down and everything changes. So even the big boys like Penn State were not quite prepared when that happens to you. I mean, you lose your leader, man. He's the guy that takes all the number one snaps during the spring and the summer and through all fall camp. And then all of a sudden he goes down. Yikes. Fortunately, I don't know if there's a team in America that had a more timely bye than Indiana did to help get Jack Tuttle ready. Not that he hasn't had some experience, but having that 2 weeks as opposed to that 1 week is going to make a big difference for him and Nick Sheridan.
Well, I think where to me it makes a big difference is this was already going to be a week where you needed to do some soul searching on offense. And Sheridan was right to say, the scheme can't change. You can't throw out your whole playbook and start over. But I remember I told this story yesterday. I remember talking to Sheridan. I did a story about him before last season, just about him taking over as offensive coordinator and kind of his background. And he said, we were talking about how he's, he started in college in Lloyd Carr's power I kind of system. Then he was playing significant snaps in Rich Rodriguez's spread option. When he was with Willie Taggart, they were throwing the ball all over the place. When he was with Mike DeBoard, they were running an offense that was, it was RPOs heavy, and it was Butch Jones kind of wide open, fast paced. And if you look back, I know IU fans love to roll their eyes at Mike DeBoard, but his offenses at Tennessee were fantastic. Offense was not the problem for the Vols back then. And the point Sheridan made was, if you're a good offensive coach, you really kind of should be able to run multiple systems. You don't necessarily need to see yourself as a coach that can only do X or only do Y, because the fundamentals are the same. It's about out blocking the defensive line. It's about winning one-on-one matchups at the point of attack, whether that's, a fullback blocking a linebacker, or it's a wide receiver getting off of one-on-one, press coverage at the boundary. Either way, it's the same concept. And then it's about staying on schedule, getting first downs and getting touchdowns. And so his point was, it's not about saying, well, we have this system. This is my system. This is the only thing I'll ever do. I won't ever change or deviate from it. It's about having, and we've heard Charlton Warren talk about this too, having concepts and then figuring out where, what individual guys are capable of within that structure. And, I think this is a bit of a longer winded answer, forgive me, but I heard a story years ago about a guy who was a soccer coach, and he was conducting a coaching clinic, and he threw a tennis ball at somebody, and the guy caught it, and he said, how hard was that? And the guy said, it wasn't very hard. I can catch a tennis ball. I said, what if I'd thrown 2 tennis balls at you? And he said, I could probably catch 2 tennis balls. He said, what if I threw 5 or 6 or 7? And he admitted, I'd probably drop, I don't think I can catch 7 tennis balls at one time. And he said the entire point of coaching isn't understanding how many tennis balls I can throw. It's understanding how many you can catch. Like it's not understanding what I'm capable of teaching you. It's understanding what you're capable of doing. And I think that's probably a lot of where like the scheme and the structure of IU's offense are not going to change. But what I think in different ways, it felt like Indiana talked about going through these last 2 weeks is maybe going back to some basics and saying, okay, what does everyone do well? What makes everyone comfortable? What essentially are we asking guys to do that it appears they can't? And maybe are there some things that they can do that we're not hammering hard enough? And from Indiana's perspective, if you are bringing in even an experienced backup quarterback in that setting, having the extra week to work through all that and maybe disassemble some of the machinery a little bit and then put it back together, having the extra week, I think, is enormously valuable. Now, it's also valuable for a defense that had a lot of kind of niggling injuries, and it seems like we're going to see a number of guys who maybe were either banged up and playing through it or kind of, week to week and out at Penn State back this week, like Tywan Mullen is an example. But offensively, I think this soul-searching period has been really valuable for Indiana, just in the sense of, number one, just being able to do it. And number two, if you are bringing a new quarterback into that setup, having extra time to really kind of dig in on, okay, as we do this, how do we make sure it also fits our starting QB?
Exactly, Dylan.
Yeah, I guess the question is what do you think, Zach, is going to be kind of what is going to be the identity of the offense going forward? If Tuttle is the guy, how much does the offense change? Because obviously he can't push the ball down the field quite as much, but he doesn't have a bad arm by any means. So what do you think the identity of the offense is going forward?
I mean, I think that's tough to say in the sense that, quite frankly, I think first and foremost, Indiana's got to sort out its blocking issues. I mean, Indiana just has not graded well. If you go back and look through, I tend to subscribe to and kind of trust like the Pro Football Focus grades and things like that. You go back and look at some of the blocking grades Indiana's posted in the first 5 weeks, certainly against the three, I know Cincinnati's not Power 5, but Power 5 level teams they've played, they've been very poor. I mean, they've been very poor. And I use this quote all the time. Kevin Wilson used to love to say that your offense isn't, you can call your offense whatever you want. I think we were asking Kevin something, like, do you run the air raid? Do you run the spread? Whatever. And he was just like, your offense is what you can block. You can call your offense whatever the heck you want. Your offense is what you can block. If you can't block it, you can't run it. And I think that's where it's really got to start for Indiana, is whether that's changing up some schemes, changing up some of what they're trying to do in the run game, changing up and maybe bringing more, quick passing elements, timing passing elements into certain things, changing up the way they use RPOs, whatever it is. I think there's a lot that's got to start with Indiana's offensive line getting better, because those are experienced players. It's, you're not necessarily dealing with guys, again, going back to the tennis balls analogy, you're dealing with guys that should be able to catch 3 or 4 at once. In terms of guys that have started a lot of games, played a lot of football at this level, et cetera. From there, I think Jack Tuttle is probably a little bit more comfortable on the move than Michael Penix, which can also obviously be a solution potentially if you run it right to your protection issues, if you're moving the pocket more often. I don't think it's at all controversial to say Tuttle can't stretch the field quite like Penix can. To be fair, very few people can. Penix throws a great deep ball. That's one of his great strengths. And so I think that you might see an offense where things are a little bit more kind of timing route oriented and things like that. I mean, it's also hard because we've seen basically about half of Jack Tuttle's college snaps have come in what people sort of lovingly refer to as garbage time, which is when the game is decided and you're probably not throwing the ball much. The only times you're throwing it, you're probably throwing it to get your backup quarterback a few pass attempts, just to keep him from getting overly rusty. And B, nobody's going to go out there and start throwing a bunch of layered stuff on the field. I'm thinking back to like games Tuttle closed out last season where, Indiana was already comfortably ahead, and it was just a matter of sort of saying, okay, go out there and just let's run something pretty vanilla that bleeds some clock and hastens the end of this game. But if you think back to the Wisconsin game being a bit of an outlier, not an outlier, but a bit of a different challenge to what I think Tuttle's going to see in the next 2 or 3 weeks, if he's starting for that long, obviously. But also that bowl game, I don't think Indiana's going to have a lot of trouble putting the game in Jack Tuttle's hands. Like I don't think they're going to be afraid to do that. I don't think they're going to be afraid to say, hey, listen, we're going to need you to throw 48 passes today. We're going to need you to go out and win us this game. I mean, they kind of did that in the bowl game to a certain extent. Now that was obviously also colored by the fact that he got hurt, during that game. And so that kind of affected his passing ability just on that specific afternoon. But one way or the other, I think you see an offense where maybe Tuttle moves around a little bit more. Maybe you stretch the field just a little bit less, but I don't think Indiana's going to have a lot of trouble looking at Jack Tuttle and saying, listen, Jack, we're putting this game in your hands. I think they trust him that way.
Yeah, I believe you, but they have to, because they have to get offensive production. And that's one of the things I've talked about is the offensive still looked completely the same week after week, and it hasn't worked. And I'm like, why don't they run jet sweeps or some flare passes or play action? And more importantly, a faster tempo offense.
For play action to work, you need to be able to run the ball. So I understand why they're not doing that very much.
Yeah, nobody's buying it. They're like, go ahead, run the ball. We hope you do. But I've wondered why they haven't tried to mix a few easy things in. Like I said, like the flare passes, jet sweeps, just rolling the quarterback out. I know they didn't want to roll Michael Penix out, didn't want to run him a lot, but that's an option they do have now with Jack Tuttle, and he's a stout kid. He took some hits. I think it was I just go back to Penn State last week when he came in the very first play. He got planted like a tree, man. Took him, but he bounced back up, and that's confidence that the offensive line can see that in him. They know that he's going to be a tough guy. Hopefully, they can block a little bit better for him. But you're right, Dylan. That's another issue. The running game very thin. Zach, that room has just gotten so thin with 2 transfers out.
Yeah, I mean, and at the same time, I think probably a couple of your biggest sort of screen game weapons too. If that's what you wanted to pivot to, and I'm thinking about DJ Matthews and David Ellis are now out for the season as well. We've seen that really serve as a, almost a de facto ground game for Indiana in the last 2 or 3 years at times. And, it really hasn't. I mean, it hasn't this season. It kind of hasn't under Nick Sheridan in general, which is interesting because, it was always amusing to me that Kalen DeBoer and Mike DeBoer were running a lot of the same sort of screening actions, and Indiana was just blocking them better under DeBoer. And so all of a sudden, screen passes that were conservative and cowardly under Mike DeBoer became sort of inspired offensive coaching under Kalen DeBoer. And that's just the way it goes sometimes. And I'm not saying that DeBoer wasn't doing certain things better, but that element of Indiana's offensive playbook has kind of disappeared, and it has surprised me. I think there's an element of just maybe not having guys that are as good at blocking on the perimeter as your Nick Westbrooks, your Donovan Hales, people like that. But, even if you wanted to pivot to something like that, 2 of the guys that you would probably look at as main beneficiaries from that in David Ellis and DJ Matthews are both out for the year. So, I mean, even that, I don't think you can look at and say, okay, well, we're just going to, we're going to really layer a lot more of that into our game plan, because now all of a sudden it's just, I kind of went on a tweet thread last weekend when the AP poll dropped, just pointing out just how difficult Indiana's schedule has appeared to have gotten with Penn State and Michigan State and Ohio State, Iowa, Cincinnati, all ranked in the top 10. And what I said was there's a real temptation to say, play the hand. You have to play the hand you're dealt. And I understand that. And at a basic level, that's true. But the problem with that metaphor is that you lose most hands. Like you lose more hands than you win.
Right.
And a lot of times the best thing, if we are going to just torture that metaphor all the way through, sometimes the best thing to do with a hand is just to fold it and move on. And so I'm not saying Indiana's season is hopeless. I'm not saying pack it in now and just start looking to 2022. What I am saying is, and I'm also not trying to apologize for Tom Allen or anyone else. That's not my intention either. But what I am saying is, sometimes not every problem has a simple solution, and it can be really easy to say, well, why don't they just do this? Or why don't they just do this? When the reality is sometimes a lot more complicated. And when you start to kind of talk through all this and you say, well, what do you do with the run game? Well, right now you're struggling to block what you've been trying to do with the run game. So do you change that up? But I think it's pretty clear to me anyway, that they have changed some things about the way they block the run game to fit Stephen Carr as opposed to Stevie Scott. But now you don't have anybody behind him that can maybe change the way that you run the football. You say, well, maybe we need to pivot to more sort of short passing, but I'm not sure if you have the personnel for that. And then amid all of that, you still have questions about quarterback health and offensive line play. And it's just, it sometimes there just isn't a perfect answer, basically, is what I'm trying to say.
We got to take a break soon to get Zach out of here. But Josh Hoover, our big-time quarterback from Texas, is on his visit this weekend, Zach. He's on his way up to Bloomington right now. I think the basketball team is also welcoming in a visitor. But if not, they're out on the road hitting at Dane Fife. So was it Ross said somewhere he was down in his neighborhood looking at someone. Saw that earlier. And I know I mentioned earlier, he went to Finland to look at that kid over there. And someone commented on that kid, said he's a baller. That Miro kid's a baller.
Yeah.
I one little funny thing, I mentioned this before you joined us. International students cannot participate in NIL.
Yeah, that is something that is one of the sort of the holes in this right now, that because basically what the problem is, it's a visa issue. And I don't understand all the ins and outs of it, but it's something to do with basically if you're here on the kind of visa you need to attend a university, I think you can't make money, or you can't make more than a certain amount of money. It's something to do with that you are. It's the combination of the visa you need to be in the United States to play sports, and the rules on earnings when you are in the United States on that specific, or not to play sports, to attend a university, and the rules regarding making money while you are on one of those visas in the United States. And I don't know what the solution is, because there's no federal. There is currently no federal NIL law. And actually, to be honest, there was a time in the spring and summer where everyone thought that was the best idea and it was coming. I think that you would find opinion a little bit more mixed on that right now, quite frankly. But one way or the other, that is one of the big holes, because obviously there are a lot of international athletes, and not just in basketball or football, but you think of your Olympic sports, tennis, track and field,
Tons
golf,
of soccer.
Yes, soccer is a great example of thinking about, there's it's a pretty common path to walk from basically if maybe you don't get signed on a professional contract out of an academy in a European league, getting a college scholarship and coming over to the U.S. and playing in the United States and getting a college degree. So one way or the other, I don't like, that is one of those where it is kind of beyond my pay grade on how to fix it. To me, the most obvious route would be to put some sort of federal NIL law on the books that could then also, because obviously visas are a national issue. That's not a state. The state of Indiana can't say, well, we have decided that, you are allowed to do X, Y, and Z under this particular visa. That's a federal issue as well. But it does seem like actually there's not quite as much, not so much that there's not a ton of energy still behind a national NIL law, but actually that now that it's coming to practice, there is more of a feeling like maybe one blanket plan for everyone is not necessarily the best way forward on this. So I don't really know how that resolves itself, but it is probably one of the biggest gaps in that sort of conversation right now.
I agree. Zach Osterman from Indy Star, we're fortunate to have him joining us today. Man, go out and have a good time. I know you're under the weather as well, so hopefully you get feeling better and can make it to the game. I'm trying to do the same, man. It's like a walking mass unit here this week.
I know. We'll all get there. We'll power through for fall.
But brother, have a great day. We appreciate you.
Thanks for having me, as always.
Absolutely. Zach Osterman from the Indy Star. Make sure you give him a follow and be a subscriber. If you're not, I am. I love reading the newspaper. We've got plenty more coming up here on Indiana Sports Beat to finish it up from the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios. Back after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington and Southern Stone Restaurant.
Whether it's a celebration or just
If anyone ever asks me, I can simply say yes. Could I do the show blindfolded? Absolutely. I feel like I'm blindfolded. My eyes are shut.
How are you feeling, Jim? How are you feeling, Jim?
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
I don't know why it keeps going away.
Yeah, that's okay.
Oh man, yeah, it's mostly. I think it's all soft tissue. I mean, I've got some nerve deal going on with my right arm. I can't lift it over my shoulder. I can't even get to my shoulder. But it's those weird. Because it seems like it's all muscular, but whatever the damage is making all the muscles tense up and tighten up. So it's pulling the muscles down in my back, down my shoulders into my arm, and in my chest even. It's like someone's pulling them backwards toward that injured spot. And it's just nonstop, freaking 9.5 level pain. And I'm like, I can't deal with this. Last night I couldn't sleep again. I took 3 muscle relaxers last night to go to bed. And I think I got to sleep about 4. But it is what it is. I'm serious doubts about tomorrow's game now. I'm like, God dang it, I can't stand up for longer than 5 minutes at a time or even sit up.
Yeah. What do you know what happened? Was it just something that kind of came on suddenly?
No, I fell. I fell
okay.
back and hit my back right at where your neck and back come together. That just right on that spot. Right, I hit an edge of a table.
Man.
Yeah, it sucks, man.
Sorry,
I need
man.
a third hand. I need to invent something that you can put like lotion on your back or biofreeze on your back yourself all over. I can't do that. I may have to go steal my back thing from the shower.
All right, here we go.
so 0% APR financing over 48 months and $0 down. Get more to your door with AndyMooreHonda.com.
Come see us at the all-new Andy Moore Honda, now in Bloomington.
This segment is brought to you by Remax Advanced Realty, Indie Home Pros team by Cheryl Sizemore. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington and Southern Stone Restaurant.
Welcome back. Indiana Sports Beat Radio coming to you on this Friday. Dylan Sinn, the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette, with us. Just finished up with Zach Osterman. Basketball's got a lot going on. More offers going out. I mentioned it earlier about the 2025 kid, Harrelson from Fishers. Man, he's dynamite. He had an offer from Maryland already this week. And so is he a sophomore? He's a 2025 kid?
I believe that makes him a freshman, right?
Well, I was thinking that, but I thought I saw something where he scored 50 points in a game last year.
Maybe they had him up there in 8th grade, but yeah, if he's a 2025 kid, then he's a freshman.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah,
I
unless
couldn't count very well, but
yeah, unless something significant has changed, or they had him up on the varsity at 8th grade last year, which obviously is not out of the question considering how big and physical he already is.
and then there was Gabe Cups. Just is his visit this weekend, or did he just finish it? I think that was his 5th visit to Indiana.
Yeah,
5. I don't recall, other than a kid that might live, within, kind of close by. That is a lot of visits from someone from Ohio to make. Yeah. 5 visits.
I mean, maybe he just loves Bloomington that much,
Well, he talked about when he came in that he enjoyed it because he spent a ton of time eating food with the coaches and see what student life was like. He's really just done his due diligence, I guess. But I mean, that just, to me, I don't see how a kid like that gets away from Indiana. Not too many recruits are coming to visit your school 5 times.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, it's great to see that like people are interested again, right? Like that's I have no idea whether he would have felt the same way about IU during Archie Miller's tenure, but it's just another example of kind of a little bit of excitement around the program, which had kind of been lacking in recent years.
But I mean, he is a talent, man. I didn't get to see him play last summer, but I watched a video of an event that I was at, and he does not look like a freshman. He doesn't look like a sophomore. I mean, I'm just thinking, I'm like, whoa, wow. You put a team like with him at point guard at 6'6", if you can land Xavier Booker for the future at 6'10", he likes to be out on the perimeter too. That's what Mike Woodson is wanting to build exactly. That's the team he's wanting to build. He wants to have a point guard. You have to. And he wants to have guys on the wings and a bigger guy, but they're not as separated as they used to be. The 1 could be a 2, the 2 could be a 1, the 2 could be a 3, the 3 could be a 2, the 3 could be a 4, and down the line. That's really what he seems to be building, a very easily interchangeable unit.
Yeah, and I mean that's the goal, right? And it's not going to happen overnight, but he has taken significant steps toward doing that in the offseason with all the transfers he brought in. And I do think that with more players transferring now, it does make it a little bit it takes the building process from a program and accelerates it at least a little bit, and gives teams a chance to kind of remake themselves on the fly in a way that you couldn't do in the past. It also helped that IU had a couple open scholarships because they had been playing with 11 instead of 13 the last couple of years. So they had some opportunities to bring some guys in without basically sending someone out the door. Obviously, Armand Franklin left, which was disappointing for I'm sure Mike Woodson even was disappointed by that. But basically, they were able to bring some people in without subtracting a whole lot of pieces. And I think that that's going to help going forward as well.
Brad hit us up on the Andy Moore Honda hotline saying Dane was in his neck of the woods last night checking out 2025 Trent Sisley at Heritage Hills. I didn't realize Sisley was a 2025 kid as well.
Yeah. So there's
wow.
Yeah.
And man, there's going to be degrees handed out before those guys get on campus.
Right. So I do wonder about that. Is it, and obviously I do think, as I said earlier, I think it's good for Woodson to go and start building relationships with these kids as early as possible because he is new at this. But I do wonder whether these because you never know, a kid develops so much between the time he's a freshman in high school and the time he's a senior. He's almost an entirely different kid. Now these guys, Trent Sisley is 6'7" as a freshman, but you never know how he's going to end up developing physicality wise, whether he's going to put on weight to be ready for the physical rigors of the Big Ten. There's so many ways that a guy like that could go in the next 4 years. So you just have to hope that maybe he has scholarship offers in his back pocket, and that makes him work even harder than he would have otherwise.
Ross points out Ja'Kai Newton is in Bloomington now, another Coach Yogg's guy. He thinks he's the 64 ranked 4-star in the 2023 class. So at least we're getting closer to seeing kids sometime soon if that were to happen. But man, they've done a great job recruiting, getting out, and coaches going their own way and getting finding their own guys. And that's what you have to have. That's the reason you have 4 different coaches. But the staff has done I gotta say, they've done a tremendous job getting out there and evaluating talent and talking to them and reaching out to them. And I had the chance to talk to Mike Woodson last week at Big Ten Media Days, and he's a player's coach. I laugh. I just sit back and laugh now when I think about the people that said, "Oh, he's too old," and this and that and the other thing. Man, he came out to Big Papa at Hoosier Hysteria. Trust me, he's in check with the younger generation. So yeah, he's just a cool, calm cat, man. That's just the easiest way. Seriously, the easiest way to describe Mike Woodson. He's just a calm, cool cat. He knows what he's doing. He's been there. He's done that. He's got the jersey. And I think these kids recognize that, especially once they talk to him. He's no BS. And you know that too. You get that instantly. He just makes you feel. He does that in the press conferences. If he'll say whatever it is. If it's this, that says this. I guarantee you, and not that I'm looking or promoting players to get ripped on us, but if somebody's not playing well, he's not going to rip them in the press. But I can see he will acknowledge, well, you know what, we're not getting what we need from Trace Jackson Davis right now, and he's got to find it, because he's kind of done that with talking about the development of these guys. Hey, he's got to get better in this, and he's got to get better at doing that. He's realistic and open and honest. And I think that is a great, well, I know it is. It's a hell of a selling tool. It will sell the parents and the students. Not every one of them, but it's real. It's sincere. I mean, it's kind of like a Tom Allen deal in another way, but it's not. There's so many shoe salesmen out there, used car salesmen, and he's not that. And it comes across very easily.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is in relating to younger kids. Yeah, they want someone that can relate to them, but they also just want someone that knows basketball. These guys are basketball players. They want to talk basketball, and Mike Woodson can talk basketball as well as any coach you're going to come across. And he of course obviously was a player at IU, so he can talk IU as well as anyone you're going to come across as well. I think that combination is plenty to be getting on with. And we've talked about this ad nauseum going back to March. I was always skeptical that I was always skeptical of the claims that he wouldn't be able to recruit. It seemed like motivated reasoning from people who didn't want him to be hired in the first place. And I still go back to some of the national reporters, the guy who wrote the story about, well, did IU just pay $10 million to get worse? What are we talking about here? And so it seemed to me the motivated reasoning was, well, Mike Woodson was hired, but he can't recruit, so he must be the wrong choice. And so I think I always was under the impression that he'd do fine in that role, especially if he got some good assistant coaches in there that were able to help him form relationships with high school coaches in the area. It seems like he's done that. I don't think recruiting is going to be an issue going forward. And now I don't know if IU is going to get top 5 classes every year. I don't know if that's something that Mike Woodson would even want more than just getting his own guys in there. But I do think they'll get their share of high profile recruits just like they have in the past.
Well, fortunately, you don't have to always do that because the transfer portal has now become your best friend.
Exactly. So and Woodson is
there
already
is
shown
that.
Yes.
And it's a smart way to go. You can pick up guys that were either undervalued when they signed, underevaluated, or they just simply got better. and they've outgrown their surroundings. Happens a lot. And look at Michigan State football this weekend. That's the reason they're undefeated and contending for the Big Ten East crown. How many transfers do they have? Like 24?
Something like that. Yeah. Basically, that's Mel Tucker has basically done what Mike Woodson is trying to do. He has taken a roster that was fairly bare, the cupboard was extremely bare, and has basically turned it almost entirely over in a year and a half. It's pretty remarkable what he's done. Obviously, he was helped significantly by hitting big on one particular transfer in Kenneth Walker III. But he has remade that roster from top to bottom, and that's kind of what Mike Woodson is going to do. Obviously, getting Trace to stay was huge, and getting a lot of these guys back in the fold was huge. But he has already made that roster significantly different than it was when he first got the job. And I think that's going to be important.
Absolutely. We got to take a break. We got more coming up. Indiana Sports Beat Radio coming to you from the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios, brought to you by Remax Realty. If you need a home in the Indianapolis area, you need Cheryl Sizemore. She's got 2 decades of experience. Reach out to her, Cheryl at IndyHomePros.com. Back with more Indiana Sports Beat Radio right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington and Southern Stone Restaurant.
Whether it's a celebration.
Oh, man. As soon as this show ends, I'm taking 2 muscle relaxers, and I hope I'll fall asleep.
Do you think, I don't want this to sound like a dumb question, but do you think you'll be good Monday?
I have no idea. I'm worried about going to the game tomorrow. I'm not worried about Monday.
What a week, man.
How have you been, Dylan?
I've been doing okay. Better than you guys, apparently.
Yeah.
We haven't been bad. It's just been a crazy week.
Yeah, no, I understand.
It's been bad for me.
Yeah,
yeah, that's true.
But yeah, I'm doing fine. I'm not sure if you heard at the beginning, Jim, but I'm not going to the game tomorrow. We have a whole bunch of high school soccer teams that are still alive in the regional championships tomorrow. So I'm going to go to Kokomo. There's a boys game at 2 and then a girls game at 4. So I'll be there, or vice versa.
Do you know the way to Kokomo?
Of course I do.
I'm kidding.
Hilarious.
Aruba, Jamaica. Ooh, I want to take it to Bahama. Come on, pretty mama.
And did you watch the Netflix show Space Force when it came out?
I've never heard of it.
Okay. Well, it has Steve Carell in it, and he did a little thing with that song in the first episode that was really funny.
Oh. How old is that show?
It came out last May, I think. There's only 1 season of it.
Or did it die?
Well, I was told, or not I was told, but I read that there was going to be a second one, but they haven't released a second one yet. You'll have about 12 minutes, it looks like, when we come back from break.
Did you pick any winners when you were talking about games?
We didn't
really do pick'ems, but
yeah.
me and Dustin did pick'ems on Tuesday.
I'm down to pick because I have thoughts.
There we go.
All right, here we go.
My
I guess go
piggy
through the
bank.
Big Ten.
You helped me pick out my first card.
I can bring it. I can turn it off for a sec. What were you gonna say?
Go through the Big Ten games first, and then any of the bigger games outside of that.
You wanted me to do it? Were you telling me?
No, you gotta list them for me. I can't see. I don't know what's going on.
Okay.
Service.
With First Federal, you can do that.
This segment is brought to you by Bubba's 33 in Clarksville. Pizza, burgers, beer.
Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington and Southern Stone Restaurant.
Welcome back to this Friday edition of Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Bill Sinn from the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette with me. John, the producer, hanging on as well. And for those of you living in the Evansville area, a couple of things. AAA Insurance is a great sponsor of us, so make sure you support those who support us. Reach out to our friends at AAA Insurance down in the southern Indiana, Evansville, and southern Illinois areas. And there's a Bubba's 33 coming to Evansville, I just found out. So that's exciting. You are going to love Bubba's 33 food, Evansville. It is great, fresh, daily made food, and they'll have about 55 TVs in there, so you can watch any sporting event you want. Great place to go hang out. All right, we're back to the games of this weekend, the Big Ten. John, I'm going to let you lead the games. I'll let you MC that, and we'll give the picks.
All right, so we'll do the Big Ten games first. We'll leave Indiana, Michigan State for last. But first up, we got Nebraska at Minnesota. What are you guys taking?
Go ahead.
I am taking Nebraska, man. Scott Frost is a kind of a dingleberry, but man, they have obviously turned it around and are winning, and they're scoring points, and they can stop people.
Yeah. I agree. They probably should be at least 5-2 right now. The only question is whether if Minnesota keeps it close, whether Nebraska can avoid one of those game-losing mistakes that they've had multiple times this season. So give me the Huskers with some reservations.
I gave my pick during the podcast, but I'll try to remember all these. I believe I went with Nebraska on this one for a lot of the same reasons, but y'all don't want to hear what I have to say. I'm just John, the producer. So let's move on. We got next up. We've got Rutgers at Northwestern.
Wow, a battle of the belly bottom dwellers. I'll take Rutgers easily. I don't even know what the spread is. What's the spread?
It looks like Rutgers is favored by 2 points.
Where's the game being played?
In Evanston.
They'll love it up in Chicago. They'll have a good time. They'll see some sights, eat some food, beat Northwestern, and go back home. I'll take Greg Schiano.
Yeah. I think you can't really go broke betting against that Northwestern offense right now. It is rough.
They're terrible.
So I will go with Rutgers. I think they take a big step toward bowl eligibility and come up with a road win. I do think Greg Schiano has that program headed in the right direction, even if they're not ready to compete with the best teams in the Big Ten East quite yet.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I'm not sure if Northwestern will end up winning a game on the rest of the Big Ten schedule, but we'll just have to see. Purdue at number 2, Iowa.
Yeah, I know that they've gotten better, and they've done some surprising things over the last couple of years with big wins. Iowa did not look that good, and Dylan mentioned it earlier. They're not that good offensively. They're damn good defensively. I don't know how Purdue is going to get anything done. They lead the Big Ten in interceptions. I think they already have 20 forced turnovers that Iowa's caused already. That's when you keep taking the ball away from people. A, they can't score. B, you're getting more opportunities to score. I'll go with the Hawkeyes.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Iowa as well. I do think Purdue keeps it closer than most people think. I think Jeff Brom will come up with some creative things to help Purdue move down the field. But I do think that Iowa is probably just a little bit too much. Purdue unsettled the quarterback. You don't want to be unsettled the quarterback going into a game against a team that has 16 picks. Give me the Hawkeyes, but closer than people think.
Next up, we've got a very interesting one. We talked about it earlier. Army at Wisconsin in the non-conference.
Yeah, that's still – Wisconsin's not very good this year. Army is tricky. I think, Dylan, you mentioned that earlier. They run that stinking wishbone. that is an offense from the 30s or 40s. That's what Notre Dame ran back when they had the Four Horsemen and those guys. Paul Horning. That's when the fullback got all kinds of carries. Or you almost couldn't tell the difference between the fullback and the quarterback.
Yeah.
But, so you mentioned how you're not used to playing against that because it takes discipline, defensive discipline. There are certain things you just have to do. You've got to stay on your guy. If you're the defensive end, you got to stick your face in that quarterback's throat and make him get rid of that ball. If you take a fake or whatever, boom, there you go. But it's 3 options every time. They've got 3 different options. So all they need is that one mistake on a drive for someone to make for it to come out big. I don't know how good Wisconsin's defense is. I haven't paid a lot of attention. It must not be that good. But going to Madison, all right, I'm going to pick the upset. I'm going to go with Army.
Dylan, I believe you picked Army earlier when we were talking.
No, I didn't pick Army. I said I think it'll be
okay.
tough. No, I'm going to go with Wisconsin. Their linebackers, Jim, to your point, you asked how good their defense is. Their defense is pretty good. Their linebackers are very, very good. They're very fast. They move the ball extremely well. I think despite the annoyance that the triple option will cause, I do think that Wisconsin will be able to slow down Army at least a little bit. And Army's defense isn't very good either. So I think Wisconsin will be able to, even as bad as Wisconsin's offense has been, I do think they'll be able to move the ball at least a little bit. And they did get a get-well win against Illinois last week. They won that game 24-0. So this team still has a pulse. And I do believe they win this game, as annoying as it is to have to play it in the middle of the season.
We've got a couple ranked games outside of the conference. Let's try to keep these a little quick. We'll get to these before we finish up with Indiana, Michigan State. We got number 12, Oklahoma State, and number 25, Texas. What do you guys think?
Texas is rolling right now, man. They look pretty good. Yeah. So I'll go with the Longhorns.
Yeah, Oklahoma State hasn't really played anyone yet. And the teams they have beaten, the lesser teams they have beaten, they haven't beaten them convincingly. I do think Texas wins this one. Bijan Robinson remains one of the best running backs in the country and would be getting a lot more Heisman hype if Texas hadn't let that game get away against Oklahoma. So, give me Texas in this one, and they finally get their first big win of the Steve Sarkisian era.
College game day heads down to Athens for undefeated number 11 Kentucky versus number 1 Georgia. What happens in this one?
How many number 11 teams have you ever seen that was undefeated, was a 23-point underdog in a game?
It's currently 21.5. It has gone down.
Yes.
Well, I'm sure they got some Kentucky money man that bet on Kentucky. I don't know that they cover the spread, but I don't think Kentucky has a snowball's chance in hell of beating Georgia in Athens between the hedges.
No.
I mean, that's just, they're looking so good.
Yeah. I agree. I agree with you, Jim. I think Georgia wins this one fairly big. Kentucky, they did beat Florida at home. That win doesn't look quite as impressive as it was before because Florida is no longer the only team to have hung with Alabama. So yeah, give me Georgia pretty big in that one. They just seem to relish beating up on some of these teams, and their defense should have something for Wan'Dale Robinson that he hasn't seen yet this year.
Before we wrap it up, our game this week, number 10, Michigan State travels to Indiana for homecoming. What's going to happen?
Well, I gave my prediction yesterday to the Hoosier.com, and I'll be honest with you, I begrudgingly gave it to Indiana 31-30. But if I was using my head, and I until I see this offense do something that it has not done up until now, I can't pick them to win, to beat a team that has had nothing but success up until now this season. And maybe hopefully that changes. So I don't know what it's going to be like, but I can't pretend that I have that knowledge when I make this pick. So unfortunately, I think Michigan State will walk out of here with a win.
Yeah, I think they will too. I don't think it's going to be a walkover. I do think that Indiana stays in this game for quite a while, and if Jack Tuttle can make some plays, I think they have a chance. Michigan State has not been dominant this year. They probably should have lost to Nebraska. They did not run away from Western Kentucky, just like IU did not run away from Western Kentucky. So this game might come down to whether IU can limit big plays. Michigan State, as we talked about before, is not great at moving the ball down the field in long, sustained drives. If Indiana can find a way to slow down Jalen Naylor on the outside, force Michigan State to run the ball repeatedly with Kenneth Walker, he's a very, very good player. We haven't seen him against a great rush defense yet. Obviously, he's going to get his yards. That there's almost no question about that. But it's, can you stop him from breaking off the 94-yard touchdown run type plays that he had against Rutgers last week? If Indiana can do that, I think they can hang around in this game, and just like they did against Cincinnati, have a chance at the end. Now, whether they can pull it out, they were not able to against Cincinnati. So the question is whether they can find a way to make plays at the end. We'll see whether, if it is Jack Tuttle, if he's more capable of doing that than Michael Penix was.
There you have it. We'll just have to see. Jim, you want to wrap things up for us?
Yep. We talked earlier about the baseball game last night. Did you? If you didn't see the ending of it, it sucked. I called the batter out on a check swing that was not even close. That was a bad call. It may have worked out anyway, but there you go. Hey, we'll be back on Monday to do it all again. Josh Hoover will join us on Monday. We'll see how his visit went. So he must have a bye week this week. Not playing high school football game. It just dawned on me. So anyway, we'll talk to Josh on Monday, as well as Charlie Miller and the gang. So make sure you join us in. Dylan, have a good, safe trip covering all your contests this weekend. Big thanks for you to join us today. Big thanks to John, the producer, doing a great job this week. We appreciate you, but we appreciate you more than anything. Without you guys, we have no reason to be here. Go out and have yourselves a great day and a great weekend. We'll see you on Monday. And until then, I'm Jim Coyle. I will see you on the radio.